Hola! Hi, so not too long ago I made some flowers for a friend of mine out of cardstock, and I put it on my Snapchat that I was making them, and a lot of people were asking me how I made them, and they were also asking me to make some. And since I don't really have a lot of time, I told a lot of people that I would make a video showing kind of like a how-to on how I made them, and then I would post it on YouTube and just share it. That way they could try it at home because it's really easy. It's just very time consuming, and since I have a full-time job y siempre ando en la calle, I don't always have time to do things for other people. I just figured if I show people how to make it, then I don't have to make it, they can make it, and it's win-win. I'm gonna show you how to make this. So the first thing you gotta figure out is what type of flower you want. That way you can get the petals. So there's different types of petals that you can create. So these are just 3 of the different types of petals that I've used before in the past. I like this type because it looks more like a big rose. So this is the style that I like. But obviously you can choose whichever one you want. You can create the petal freehand, or you can look for a pattern online and print it out. I've done it multiple ways. In this situation, because now I have a Cricut, I just found the petals online and then I just cut them using my Cricut. But in the past, I've done them freehand, or I've found a pattern online and I've used it as a stencil. So you can either, if you have a Cricut as well, you can use one. It makes things a little easier, or you can just find the style petal that you want and you can trace it using a pencil or a pen. So I've done this before in the past. You just line up the petal, you trace it, and then you can just cut along the lines. The size of the flower really just depends on how many petals you use and the size of the petals. I already pre-cut the petals. I don't want to make a big flower, so I'm not getting petals this big. The biggest size I'm gonna use is this size. But like again, if you want a really huge flower, you'll want to use a bigger petal. Another thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need a base for your flowers. So I like to use a round base. This is where I'm gonna line up all the petals. I'm gonna glue them onto this base. And that's how you start creating your flower. Another thing that I recommend doing, once you have all your petals, cut a slit in the center, like this. You can see that. Because that's what's gonna make your petal get that 3D effect. Instead of being flat like this, you're gonna take both flaps and overlap them. And you see how the petal stands up? So all you do is take both flaps and cross them, overlap them, and then you have that 3D effect. Then you put a dot of glue there, and then you'll glue the petal to the base. Obviously, the more you overlap it, the more it'll stand up. If you don't want the petal to stand up as much, you can overlap it very little, just maybe on the corner. Sometimes I like the flower to be like a bell, so I'll overlap it a good amount. That way it stands up. So like I said, it just really depends on what type of flower you want to make. Same thing with this one. I pre-cut a little flap, and then you would just overlap it and it stands up. It doesn't really matter how far you make the cut because it's gonna be up to you how far you want to overlap it. But you want to make the cut in the center. I'm gonna go ahead and cut a slit on all of the petals that I pre-cut. These bigger petals, if I wanted a really big flower, these petals are 11 inches. So you can see I put there 11 inches. So this would create a really big flower. But since I don't want to make that big of a flower, I have these flowers. These are, the biggest petal is 9 inches. I'm gonna use 3 different petal sizes. The second petal is 7 inches, and the last petal is 5 inches. Also guys, the base of the flower from top to bottom measures 5 inches. But obviously the base, you can make it whatever size you want. I just like to keep it a good size because I'm gonna have a lot of petals on there. Another thing to think about is how you're gonna wanna display them. If you plan on hanging them, one thing that I found that makes it easy is to put a little flap behind the base. That way when you do have the flower completed and you want to say tack it to a wall, you just put the thumbtack here on the flap and then you can hang it on the wall. So I'm going to be using this base because I already glued a flap to it. Here's another base that I have created. Also, I'm not sure if I covered this already or not, but I'm using, the material that I'm using is cardstock. I like to have the flowers have some type of bell shape, and I also like them to be, the petals to be kind of leaning back. So the way I get that effect is I take, before I start overlapping the flaps, I take the petal and I just roll it back. There's different ways you can do it. You can just roll it back on your own. I've seen people get a marker, like a thick marker, and put it on here. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm gonna take a highlighter and I'm gonna show you what I've seen. What I've done this before myself. Is if you put the highlighter here, the marker, and you just bring the top of the petal back, you can start rolling it like a taquito. You roll it, obviously the more you roll it, the further back the petal will lean. I like to roll it all the way down to where I cut the flap. After that, you can kind of extend it and form it the way you want it. So my petal would now look like this. And it'll have a nice effect once all the petals are on the base. It'll look like a nice flower. I don't think you can see, oh, you can kind of see actually. You see these little ridges right here? Because this cardstock is so thick, it wrinkles when I fold it back. But let me show you on a regular cardstock. If I were to do the same thing, that doesn't happen as much. And you have that little effect of the petal leaning back. Once you overlap it, it'll look like that. And you see on this one, you can see some wrinkles, but not nearly as many as this one. I was heating up the glue gun. I'm gonna see if it's already hot so I can start gluing the petals. Yep. And I had some music on earlier, but I figured I would just turn it off. Okay, so first petal, it's already glued. If you want to save time, you can try bending them back all at once instead of one by one. The only thing that I found doing that is sometimes they don't bend all the same size, but it is a time saver, as you can see with this one. I'm bending them all at the same time versus one by one like I did with these. I'll do the same with the last petals. So you just bend it back and you just roll it like a taco. Como si estuvieras haciendo flautas o enchiladas. Just let it go. Now I'm going to continue to put hot glue on one of the flaps and then overlap it to create the illusion that the petal is sticking up. This is also optional. You don't have to do this, but I like for the flowers that I create to have a little bell effect. I feel like it looks more like a flower that way. But a lot of people like the flat flowers as well, so personal preference, whatever you prefer. There's actually no right or wrong way to do these. If you like them flat, there's nothing wrong with that. If you like them to look like me, like the ones that I make, have a little bit of a bell effect, then you can do that as well. Okay, so I've already glued down all the flowers, and I'll kind of give you a little preview of what it'll look like once you put them on the base. So you start arranging them however you want it. Obviously, if you want a more fuller flower, you can. I only cut out 5 of this size petal, but you can cut out 6, you can cut out 7, however many you want. The more you cut out, the more full your flower will look. I don't want it to be super full, so as you see, I'm already creating the flower here. I'm not gluing them down yet, but I just wanted to show how it would look. I'm going to continue to glue down the smaller petals. So for the smaller flower, I'm going to go ahead and move a little bit closer so you can see exactly what it is that I'm doing. I'm just putting glue on one flap of the petal, like this. And then I'm getting the other flap and I'm crossing it, overlapping it, putting a little pressure on there until I feel like it's dry. Okay, so now that I have all my petals glued down and bent back, it's time to start putting them on the base. I just realized I need another petal this size, the 7-inch petal. So I'm going to just trace one out on the cardstock paper and cut it. So this is good because I get to show you, not using the Cricut, how I used to do it before. I'm also gonna I'm gonna make 2 just in case, but from the 5-inch flower, I wanna make 2 more. So I think I'm gonna need them. Okay, now I feel like I have all the petals that I need. So I'm actually gonna start gluing down the petals. So again, I like to place them more or less where I think I would want them to see before I glue them down, because once you glue them down, it's kind of permanent. So the placement that I want is kind of that right there. I'll get the glue and I'll put glue in the area that I'm going to glue down the petal. Put some pressure and do the next one. So you'll see right here, the flowers are already starting to form. It also is kind of the bell shape that I said I like. So now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the next size petal and I'm going to put it right here where you see there's a gap to cover that gap. Now the placement of the petals is really important because as you can see, I left a little bit of a gap, a big gap here between these petals. Ow. So now the flower looks a little bit weird, but once you add all the petals, it will start looking a little better. Let me show you how it's looking now with the second layer of petals. So you're starting to see a more well-shaped flower. Again, hangs like a bell. All right, now I'm gonna do the last layer of petals. So you do the same thing. In between each petal, I like to put the next layer. I have already finished gluing down all the petals, and that's how my flower is looking so far. Cute. Now for the center, I like to do what looks kind of like a burst in the center, and in order to have that effect, this is what I do. Okay, another thing I want to note is that I used 5 petals of each size. If I wanted a bigger flower, all I would have to make is a bigger petal than this one, and that would go and cover these gaps that you see here. So it would kind of look like this. So see, it would make a bigger flower. I'm gonna get a black to make the center burst. So what I do is I take a normal cardstock, fold it in half, hot dog style, and then I cut about, I would say maybe an inch off the bottom, this part. Then I take the leftover, and on the part that's folded, I'm going to cut slits all the way to the end. And I'm gonna cut the slits all the way to maybe like an inch to the bottom. The slits also, you can make them as thick as you want. I like them thin, so let's see. So I like them to be about that thin. Okay, so as you can see, some of my slits, the slits are about, they're all different sizes really. Some are thicker than the other, but it doesn't really matter because I'm just gonna fold them and it actually might work nicely. So once you cut all the slits, you're gonna open the paper and then you're gonna bend it the other way, the opposite way that it was folded. And it'll create a little oval shape. Then what I like to do is I like to put glue on this entire bottom line, a very thin layer of hot glue. This will bind both sides, and you can still see where these ridges are not flat. So then you're gonna take this paper and you're gonna roll it again. So I like to also put a little dot of glue here, so when I roll it, it stays in place. Apply a little pressure and then just continue to roll it. This will create a little burst for the center of your flower, and it'll just add a little extra. And you know we love to be extra. So this is what it'll look like. Then what I like to do is I like to press each of these little slits down to spread them out. Again, this is all up to personal preference. You might just want petals without anything in the center. I've seen that as well, but I like to have the center looking a little extra. So that's why I created this. I don't know if there's an easier way to create this, but this was my little invention and it worked. And I feel like it looks pretty good. It gives the flower a little personality. So now it looks like this. It looks like a flower on it in its own. So this is what will go in the center of your flower to make it pop. And you're gonna want whatever flower, whatever color your petal is, you're gonna wanna accent it with a matching color. I just use black and white, just basic colors, just because I didn't want to waste any of my color cardstock. Okay, now we're gonna glue this to the flower. I put glue all around this section right here of the paper. And then I put chingos of glue in the center of the flower. Just so I know it stays in place. Apply some pressure for a few seconds. And then you can continue to press the little slits until you feel like you got them where you want them. And your flower will look like this. So now when you're ready to display it, all you would do at this point is find the tab that we glued earlier, put a thumbtack or whatever you want to tack it with, and you're ready to tack it to the wall. So this, oh, the center was not completely dry yet. So let me leave it a little longer so it can dry. I think I put too much glue. I just wanted it to be really secured. Okay, so you'll take your tack and you will tack it to the wall, and then you have your flower. Not the best, but I did okay. So if I was really taking my time, I would have done a little better on placing the petals, because you can cover this section. I think if you covered these gaps right here, it would actually look a lot nicer. Covering that gap with another petal. But again, it's all personal preference. Okay, I hope I was effectively able to show you how to create one of these cardstock big paper flowers that you see everywhere. It's really easy and simple to create it. I did it really quickly, so that's why it might look a little messy, but if you take your time, it'll look a lot nicer. And that's pretty much the gist of it. All you do is create the form that you want, create the petal that you want, cut the petal, glue it onto a base, and you'll have your final product. Hope this helps. Bye.